Good afternoon and hello, folks. My name is Rich Longo, and I will be your host for today's presentation. Today, we are going to learn about Itil simulations, improving your IT, utilizing Itil simulations. And this is being presented by Austin Group's very own Michael Vichdel. Now, Michael has been in the IT industry for a number of years now and has even had a stint there several years at BMC Software. He is very good at solutions marketing, and he's an ITIL instructor, an enterprise architect, and certified COBIT instructor, ITIL V2 service manager, ITIL V3 expert, ITIL 4 DPI author, lean IT, and governance practitioner. But before we get started, Michael, let me introduce Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners is here to offer best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practice. Our professional services team has well over 5,500 professional service engagements on site and remote, especially in this day and age. Remote's pretty important to most organizations. As an organization ourselves, Flycast has well over 1,100 regular customers throughout Canada and the United States. I encourage you to reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278, or go take a look at our website and chat with one of our IT experts Monday through Friday. That little green box in the right-hand corner of the website, they're there to help you answer questions, provide you with material that you want to know about, or you can email us at info@flycastpartners.com. I encourage you to check out any training or podcasts or webinars that we have upcoming or partner events. During today's presentation, we will be taking your questions live. So I encourage you to type those questions in, and we'll get your answers live with Michael throughout today's presentation. So at any time throughout the presentation. So Michael, before I turn the screen over to you, let's go ahead and launch our first poll. Our first poll is, have you ever attended experiential learning or gamified learning? Let's see what the audience says here, Michael. Everybody's responding pretty good here. So far, 83% of the audience says no so far. We get another minute. Wow. We've got 75% of the audience has voted, and it's a solid 73% now that has basically said that no, they haven't. We're 80%. It's still no. Oh, and we'll go ahead and close this poll out, and I'll turn it over to you, Michael. But it looks like this audience they're not very familiar with this in general, according to our poll. So overall, 75% of them said no. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over and have you talk about how they might want to consider doing such a thing for their organization.
Well, that's great, Rich. Appreciate that. And thank you all for the responses there. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about ITIL, IT service management simulations. Great audience then. If everybody's here then has not gone through an experiential learning session as of yet, I think this will be very informative for you. I'm actually very excited to discuss the simulation aspects of really learning how we as an organization can, come together, work together, and I also say have fun together within the simulation. So we will discuss at a high level what these simulations are all about, and it'd be great if we had some questions along the way. And I know Rich will be bringing those up as we go forward here. So thank you all once again for attending today's session. Let's talk a little bit about these simulations. Now, we do talk about specifically the ITIL simulation here. Please keep in mind that we are going to be talking more broad about the IT service management space in general, but also more importantly, how can these simulations improve what we're trying to achieve within the organization? And we'll talk about some of those aspects of what we can, maybe should be improving upon within our organization. So again, as we go forward here, please ask questions as you see fit, and I'll be more than happy to answer those. Myself and Rich will address those as they come up. All right. So when we talk about the simulation piece, we think about the aim of why we have simulations. Simulations are a way to demonstrate the value of whatever service management practice we are trying to embrace, whether it be a service management practice or whether it be multiple, which is typical in many organizations, that these service management practices, these processes, the tool integration, the other development teams that we might have in an organization, as we all work together, trying to bring this together within the context of a business, not just a business, but also a technical or an IT model. So as we go forward and we begin to leverage and introduce simulation activities within the organization, it does in fact help us to address or focus on a proper maturity curve that we can address to continually improve upon what we've set out to do to deliver value in the very end. As we go forward, the simulations, they are very obviously experiential. Now we call them experiential. We also call them gamified learning, which is maybe the newer term that's being used in the marketplace. But it's also getting that experience of how we as an IT organization can align ourselves to the business needs of what we as an IT organization do to truly enable the business to be successful. Then we also talk about the fact of, well, let's make sure we have an aim and focus on the improvement. How can we improve? Are we improving? And to what extent are we improving? Are we improving in the right direction to make sure we stay aligned to the overarching business focus, mission, vision, goals, objectives, and such? So the aim of the simulations is really to make sure that we have a much better understanding of how we can leverage service management practices like ITIL being the de facto standard in the industry for service management, but the processes and the tools and the people, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit as well. So we think about how are they being used? Well, one, these are being used in many, many different facets. I personally have delivered, I think it's safe to say, around 1,000 simulations on basically every continent on the globe, with the exception of maybe one really far south. But these are really used to help convince people within the organization or externally the organization of the need for IT service management as a practice within the organization, or how we as an internal organization support other external organizations, whether it be from a cultural perspective and the need for cultural modifications, whether it be from a process-based perspective and whatever processes they might be. How can these processes be enhanced by technology and the services that we in fact offer? But also more importantly, it's an educational means to where we can use these simulations to truly educate us on the previous items there, whether it be culture, process, technology, the services which we offer, or otherwise. Because there are many other practices that are out there. So if we go down the path and look at other practices that are out there, Rich, maybe we can pull up the question in regards to what you might be using. Are you using these industry recognized practices that are out there? Let's go ahead and take a minute or so to go ahead and address this poll.
Okay. Is your organization leveraging IT service management practices such as ITIL, Lean, DevOps, or Agile? So far, 80% say yes, but that's with 30% of our audience. That number's going back and forth quite a bit. We're 50% now, and with 60% of the audience. No, this keeps swinging both ways. We're 72% of the audience. So far, 61% of the audience says yes, they are leveraging one of those. We'll give it about 10 more seconds, folks. Okay, it looks overall that the yeses have it.
I like the yes wins. Good.
There you go.
Awesome. Now, that's great because these simulations are typically used for whatever practice or whatever flavor of practice, whether it be internal or other industry practices or even standards. Standards like that of ISO, whether it be other practices wrapped around ITIL, whether it be COBIT, DevOps is a big practice nowadays. these simulations, and we have simulations that can accommodate pretty much any one of those practices that are out there, especially around the project management space, which could actually involve many other practices like ITIL or practices like DevOps, lean practices, agile practices. So these are really great ways to understand more about the practice and educate the organization about that practice, more specifically wrapped around ITIL, as it being the de facto standard, that I always say is kind of really the underlying fabric of many other practices that are out there. Much of this is based upon what Dr. Edwards Deming had started way back in the late 40s with TQM, which has obviously triggered many other practices as well. So it is about making sure that we as an organization can understand what these practices do in a very effective, but also a very cost-efficient fashion from an educational perspective. These simulations typically are a great way to get everybody on board of what these practices are from a non-theoretical perspective. We'll talk about this in a little bit about the hands-on piece. But it also helps us to use these simulations to support the organization's implementation of these practices and to address certain aspects like we talked about, where it be culture, it be tools, it be technology, it be the processes, but more importantly in a rollout situation, hence the project management space. And that's why we have a very specific simulation wrapped around project management to help us understand how can we engage in a more successful rollout through project initiatives, including the individual tasks, the individual milestones, and such, so we can complete the project on time and within budget. And yes, scope creeping is one of those things we have to deal with. So we need to also take into consideration those as we move forward and still stay focused on the value delivery at the very end. It also brings to surface the value of the knowledge transfer amongst the individual, and I'm going to use this term loosely, amongst the individual silos within the organization. Now, typically speaking, most organizations have a significant amount of silos where we don't necessarily bridge these silos maybe appropriately, but if we were to transfer the knowledge across these silos as we begin to break the silos down, then that becomes a much more holistic service management approach in service delivery, so that we are all on the same page about what needs to be delivered. And that's where the simulations can in fact be used to understand the value of knowledge transfer amongst these teams within the organization. They are in fact a fantastic tool for team building. And I think right now, maybe we all could use a team building approach because of what's going on in the world today. And matter of fact, we did this simulation over in Holland a number of years ago, where all they wanted to do was basically get everybody on the same page about what the organization's initiatives are, but also they use it as a team building exercise, which they do every year. They bring in some sort of team building exercise. And we did it for the organization of 2,500 people. We'll talk more about the counts here in a second, but 2,500 people. And they enjoyed it so much as a team building exercise. They had so much fun, but everybody, by the end of the day, they were all in an understanding, a common agreement of what the CIO's initiatives were and what we as an IT organization are striving to become, as opposed to an IT-based organization to a truly service-based organization. Now, in today's world, some might say, well, these are simulations. How do we do these in situations such as this global pandemic taking place? Well, they can be modified. They have been modified to deliver on-site in a social distance fashion, where we're still safe and we're still aligned to CDC guidelines, to your corporate guidelines and such. And matter of fact, we just got done finishing a few of these simulations with an organization, and we do in fact maintain social distancing and such with this here. So they can be used on-site. We do have a new simulation coming out that is actually based on online. However, when we start talking about team building, the online maybe not as effective as the on-site. I think on-site is we're collaborating and working together and working closely with one another, not necessarily physically, but actually as far as the communication, the knowledge transfer, it does in fact work out really, really well with whatever mode you wish to use. Okay, so we start thinking about the value of these organization or the simulations. I really, really like this first bullet here, where the value of this here is to truly get everybody into that aha moment, right? Where everybody's on the same page about what is it we're trying to do. And when we think about the aha moment, I mean, we might think about incident management as a practice. And within incident management, we might think about how do we leverage incident management in regards to supporting our customers? How can we enable incident management to truly support our customer base and our user base? Well, there's many other processes and practices that truly support incident management. Processes and practices wrapped around problem management, around change management, around configuration management, service level management. So this really brings all these processes and practices together to where folks do walk away and they understand clearly what are these practices and how do they work together in the organization. So therefore, we have a cross-organizational understanding of how do these teams, how do these silos work together in order to benefit the end result, which is the value delivery. It does, in fact, increase the buy-in, the adoption, and the compliance of what we as an organization need to do to truly, once again, enable the business to be successful. And kind of breaking these silos down, DevOps talks about the wall of confusion. Well, that's the wall we're breaking down, right, between different organizations and teams and understanding how we fit in this massive puzzle of the entire organization. Reduction in the implementation times for the shared understanding of how we must involve other disciplines in the organization to ensure that we are going to be implementing correctly and making sure we understand all attributes associated to projects, other practices, development cycles, release cycles, implementation, warranty periods, and such. Right. So it is about making sure that we engage and work across the entire board. Now, you can use these, and the values of these here are, in fact, supporting the visionary aspects of the executive team. I'll give you an example. We did a simulation for an executive team with a fairly large financial organization. And we had the CIO in the session, and it didn't take a very long period of time during the simulation where the CIO, for the most part, stopped us through the simulation and said, you know, Michael, we get this. We understand what this is. This is a fantastic tool for us to use. And he asked me this question, very specific. He goes, Michael, how can I get this across my entire organization? Well, that was the end of it. From that point on, we went through and we delivered this to over 800 more people within the organization because the C-suite clearly understood the value that this brought to the table within the organization. And so we went through with this. That's because it was their initiative within the organization. It's also delivering to the organization, understanding between us as an IT organization to, and I'll say this loosely, them as the business, which I always say maybe that is an organization as the us and them mentality, where we might have a finger pointing where they, the business, don't understand what we do in IT, and I wish they could understand what we do because they might actually give us more time and maybe more effort, more resources to accommodate things. And then the other aspect is, you know, they're probably saying the same thing as well, right? They, the IT organization, don't understand what we as a business need. So I call it the kind of the us and them mentality, which unfortunately is the case for many organizations. Right. So when we think about these simulations and the value they bring to the table, it is a significant return on not just the investment, but a significant return on value for the delivery of these simulations to the organization, to where everybody gets on the same page and they all do, in fact, have that aha moment at the very end. So simulations, what is a simulation? Well, a simulation, by definition, they talk about this as being the representation of the behavior, the characteristics of one system through the use of another, right? And we start talking about the simulations. These simulations can be delivered in many, many different ways. I personally and our teams have delivered these simulations in a full day, which is typically a recommended way to do it. We have a full day session, and the full day session would consist of a number of rounds, and we'll see that in a second as well. But we've also truncated these based upon the organizational needs and also time and maybe even the specific target audience. right? So we start talking about the simulations being configured to the appropriate target audience. We talk about maybe the C-suite. The example I gave you, we went through it in a 3-hour session, right? So they can very easily be tailored to any target audience within the organization, but they can be done in a 1.5-hour session to kind of get the message across. They can be done in a half a day session, and so on, right? And we'll talk some more about that as well. But they are a great way to kind of drive the message home. And again, we talk about them as quote unquote simulations or experiential learning, or in fact, gamified learning. Is it a game? Yeah, they're different types of simulations, and they are kind of a game. They are fun. They are entertaining. They're extremely educational. And as we talked about the value before, that does in fact get everybody on the same page about really what is it we're trying to do and achieve that aha moment that we're trying to reach. They are based upon the Kolb's experiential learning cycle. So David Kolb came out with this model, way back when, like 1984 is when he came up with this experiential learning cycle. And within the experiential learning cycle, we do talk about, let's go do something. Whatever it is that we need to do, let's go do it. Now, is there a planning stage ahead of time? I sure hope so. But we're talking about primarily the experiential piece, which is the doing aspect of a simulation. So let's go do what we need to do in the simulation, and then we'll come back and reflect on this when we get to the theory piece, the review piece. But we need to go out there and do it. We need to get our fingernails dirty with this and really understand what we set out to achieve. And the question is, did we achieve what we set out to do? And this is also known as the outcome. So what we're going to do after Kolb recommends do what needs to be done, we need to come back and review this. And the reviewing aspect is to understand, did we achieve what we set out to do? Outcomes typically has at the highest level 2 flavors. One aspect of the outcome is the intended outcome. What was the intended outcome? Typically speaking, this might be an approach for project management. To achieve this, we need to go through these tasks, these milestones, and certain timelines we need to review, make sure we're on the same page. So we get to the end of the project, we have achieved what we set out to do. Well, that was the intended. The actual can only be really determined by the recipient, the user, the customer, maybe our partners, our suppliers, whoever that might be. We want to make sure we review not only the intended, but also the actual, and measure that as well, which is going to be a major contributing factor to our successes. What we intended to do, did we achieve it? So we're going to theorize, and I, as an instructor, even the simulations, will help you all as a participant in the simulation to discuss what can we do to make things better as we go forward. Did we achieve what we set out to do? And if not, what can we do to make the wrong right, as I always say? But where are there improvement opportunities? And so therefore, we will discuss that. I will discuss it with you. And then we'll go off and build a plan to go off and act upon some sort of improvement opportunity. So David Kolb came out with this experiential learning because they talk about how everybody learns differently. And there are some certain studies out there that talk about when you go and take a class that's e-learning only, just you and a computer, the retention is going to be different for most folks than it is for some other folks. You talk about the in-classroom setting where we have a book and we have a PowerPoint deck and we have an instructor like myself teaching you the theoretical aspects of what, say, Itil is, say Itil 4 from a foundational level. There's a big difference between the theoretical approach to the experiential approach. The experiential approach, we learn by doing, and that's where David Kolb came into play. Say, this is an experiential learning cycle, and this is what we need to do. And so when we do this, some of the studies even show that on average, folks will retain up to 38% more data when they do the activities, as opposed to theoretically learning in a book, highlighting pages, highlighting lines, trying to focus on passing an exam of sorts or otherwise, or in many cases, the e-learning aspects, right? E-learning is an option as well. Me personally, I don't do very well with e-learning. I do very well in classrooms. I do extremely well in experiential learning. And that's where David Cobb comes into play, is to talk about what is an approach for experiential learning and why, and what are the benefits of doing experiential learning. So we do this, we also base it upon some sort of balanced scorecard. So as we go through the simulation, not only using tools and technologies or these products that we might have, we align what we're doing from a service management perspective to the overarching needs of the business. And we stay focused on the customer's experience, the customer's value that in fact has been delivered. So as we go through the simulation here, we kind of show you on this slide here where we talk about the scorecard that we're looking at there. We talk about, are we actually getting better round over round over round? Now the simulations can range from 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, up to 5 rounds if we need to. Most simulations run around 4 rounds throughout the entire day. If we're to truncate that, we might do a half a day, a fairly aggressive 3-round session, or in some cases, we can do a session for the executive team where it's not taking as much time, and it could be a 2-round session and still get the value of the simulations and understanding, as the example I gave for that fairly large financial institution. So as you see here in the scorecard, we kind of show you the different attributes associated to are we or are we not getting better. On the top tabs up there, you have a scorecard. We give you a phenomenal Gantt chart that kind of shows our progression through the round and what we've done to resolve certain situations. We have a maturity model that we use. We'll talk about that in a second as well. We also have a comparison from round to round. We give you a nice little grid and a table and a chart and bar charts and line charts to show you how we're progressing, where we're doing well, maybe where we need to improve upon other aspects within the simulation. As we reflect and review and go back to theory again, we will come back and talk about how does this really relate to your world? And everybody starts to, at round 2 and round 3 in a 4 to 5 round session, they really begin to relate. Yes, this is a situation we have in our environment today. I really now see how we must integrate other silos, other teams, other disciplines within the organization in order to repair this particular issue within our environment. And the light bulbs just start to pop. And everybody starts walking down that tunnel and start going down that tunnel. And at the very end of the day, they truly do get a chance to touch that light bulb at the very end and have a real understanding and experience of what it means to leverage products with our business initiatives, leveraging IT service management practices to enable a higher quality deliverable for our customers' experience. And that's kind of how we map this out. So we don't just give you a simulation and have fun. We actually go through the simulation. We have some data. We have tons of data on the back end that we reflect on and review and have a theoretical discussion about what can we do to make things better as we progress. But the more important piece is how do we collaborate and with whom and at what time for what reasons so we can all make better, well-informed decisions as we go forward. Very exciting stuff when you start walking through the balanced scorecard and measuring the simulations against one round to the other, and then reflecting back to what does this mean to the organization. It really does come down to this. It comes down to this service management approach. And at the highest level, Itil always talks about these primary aspects within service management. We do bring in the fact that, yes, we need people. We need the people. Is it just about having a person? No, it's about having the right person with the right skill sets to accommodate the role that needs to be fulfilled in order to enable the business to do what it needs to do. However, people need to follow and grow and mature in sound business processes to making sure that we have a structured set of activities aligned to achieve a specific objective. And we exercise all these processes and practices that ITIL talks about. If you're ITIL version 3 aware, we talk about the processes of each one of the 5 stages of the service lifecycle. If you're ITIL 4 aware, then we talk about all aspects of what goes on within the service value system, and then more importantly, that service value chain, leveraging the 7 guiding principles associated to the 4 dimensions, and making sure we take into consideration the ITIL recommended practices to achieve X, whatever that might be. So we need to do this. So we need to make that happen, but that can't happen unless we leverage technology. What technology? Our technology, their technology, our partners and our suppliers, our consulting services. We need to take all those into consideration. So we do talk about that space. We experience that space round over round over round. And in the beginning, round 1, it's going to be fairly chaotic. This is where people begin to say, yeah, we're horrible. And then we ask the question at the very end of that first round as we go to a review and theory, we come back and ask them, how was this round for you? And basically they all come back and say, well, that was chaotic. We were horrible. Well, that just leaves a whole lot of room for improvement. So as the rounds progress, we do in fact get better and better and better, and we have measurable, quantitative, objective data to demonstrate the fact that we are getting better. And in certain areas and other areas we need to improve upon, so we focus on those as well. So we have a nice, well-rounded approach to continual improvement. What is this typically based on? Well, it is typically based on the CMMI model, or we might talk about one specifically related to IT, and this is the Gartner IT maturity model, as you might see there on the right-hand side, right? So we show you this not only from a simulation perspective and a service management perspective, but also making sure it aligns to other industry practices or even guidelines or even standards like ISO, if you're down the path of ISO, or maintaining compliance towards Sarbanes-Oxley, NIST, FSMA, whatever it might be. Right? So we need to measure our improvement against those as well. So from a simulation perspective, who should take into consideration these simulations? Well, I always say anybody within whatever vertical you might be in. All right, we've done these simulations for very small organizations. Now there are certain sizes of around 8 at a minimum as far as a participant rate that need to fulfill these simulations. But any vertical in the marketplace, whether you be in the manufacturing space, which is a phenomenal way to go, since we do talk about Dr. Edwards Deming and TQM, which is kind of where that practice was really focused on when Dr. Deming came out with that. Anywhere within the public sector. We've done these for many, many different public sectors, whether you be in the state agency space, whether you be in the federal space, whether you be in the DOD, DOE, DOI, whatever space you might be in. It really doesn't matter. The nice thing about the simulations is we can tailor it to accommodate the message that is required or needed to get that across to the organization. Healthcare, we have a very specific healthcare simulation. So if you are in the healthcare, we have a healthcare quote unquote skin that we use to help the students resonate more with the simulation and how it relates to their real world as well. Financials, we have one as well. The private sector, whether you be in the retail space, right? So we have the retail space and we have retail simulation. So it's a great way to have a much better understanding and a relationship to the simulation, but also more importantly to your own organization. Consulting firms use this as a means of getting involved with their customer base as well, to where they will offer this or help their customers through the simulations to help understand how we as a consulting firm can accommodate and assist you as our customer in moving forward with your service management practices as you go forward. Bottom line, folks, any organization anywhere within the world that I know I have delivered across the globe, anybody can benefit from these simulations here. Right, so I always say take into consideration on what we might want to do with these simulations for your organization, and maybe take in consideration whether the simulation could be beneficial for you and your organization or not. But I think that might draw the question here, Rich, where we might go down and ask that question specifically about the simulations and maybe how this could or otherwise accommodate their organization.
I have launched it. Could your organization benefit from enhanced cross-organizational collaboration communication techniques? So far, it says yes. It's a resounding yes, actually. With so far it's 100% yes for all those that have voted. good majority of our audience has voted, and they're all saying yes. I guess everybody thinks that they could probably use this. Now, we'll give it another minute or so. Folks, this is a great time also to send me your questions. Mike is here to answer all your questions today. And right now, I only have a couple questions in queue. And as soon as we get done with this poll, I'll go ahead and ask the first one. But if you have any questions for Mike about these simulations, by all means, type those in there right now. And I'll read those off to Mike, and he'll get the answers for you, whatever that might be. I'm going to go ahead and terminate this poll, but it is a resounding 100% yes, with almost 70% of the audience voting. They all say that they could benefit from it. So that's huge. That's big.
That's
so
great.
Let's start off with question number one. And it's a great question. How would you set up a simulation? And then also part two of that, what type of folks would be the target audience?
That's a great question/questions. How to set up a simulation. One, when we start talking about setting up a simulation, it's always great to get in contact with your supplier to where we want to do a simulation and we're not sure exactly how to set this up. So can you help us with this? So when we set up a simulation, what we typically do is work with you to identify really what is it you're trying to achieve, which I think is a really, really important piece to this here, because the simulations can be tailored to accommodate whatever the flavor of messaging you wish to bring across the organization, whether it be team building, whether it be ITSM. What about ITSM? Maybe it's DevOps and Lean and Itil, or maybe it's DevOps, Agile development and Itil. Whatever that might be, or maybe it's simply, Mike, we're really struggling with the service operational space, and we really want to focus on service operations. So we would talk to you about that, get the message that you want to portray within the simulation, go through the simulation and relate that simulation to the needs of the organization, right? So when we talk about the needs of the organization, that also comes down to who the target audience is going to be, which is an extremely important piece of this as well. Do we want to just bring in, 8 to 19 people? I would start off by saying no. It's great to get everybody in there, and it's a fantastic way to get the message across a mass amount of people in a short period of time, and the ROI is there. We like to blend it up where you have upper management staff partaking with mid-tier management staff and along with the individual contributors. It's multifold where value there, where if we bring the executive team in, it gives them a really good chance to, one, work with other staff members that maybe they're not familiar with. Personally, if we have upper management staff on the call right now, I like to put the upper management staff in situations of simulation where they might actually get to experience the real world pain of IT operations. And I'll put them into a particular role where they're going to experience that. And they will kind of go, oh, wow, we really need to work on operations because I felt the pain in the simulation. So a variety of roles within the organization is the best way to go per simulation. It's obviously recommended that we go down the path and make sure everybody within the organization does in fact go through the simulation. Good question.
All right, and folks, if you have any other questions, go ahead and type them in. We are almost at the end of our time that we allocated, but if you have questions, now's the time to ask while we have Mike's ear today. It's not very often we get to have him around. Mike, I want to thank you for a great presentation. I've actually been through one of these simulations, and I saw the benefit. In our organization, it was huge for Flycast partners when we did it. And I think you did a great way of presenting it and explaining it today. So I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Folks, thank you for taking time out of your busy days as well. And if you have any questions at all, by all means, reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Go and chat with us live on our website Monday through Friday. They're standing by for you. They'll get you the answers you're seeking, or sign up for a couple more of our events coming up, or listen to a podcast or two. You can also email us at info@flycastpartners.com. And with that being said, folks, everyone, please stay safe out there. And until our next webinar, I encourage you to make sure that you're checking back with us occasionally for future webinar and virtual lunch and learn events.